welcome to this, the first edition of the new podcast and video series from the Migrant and Minority Ethnic Council. In fact, it's the first of a pair. We're releasing a special double bill to mark Black History Month 2020. And that gives us the theme of the conversations: the importance of highlighting Black history, the significance of the month itself, and the need for education at all levels on the issues that it raises. In this first programme, I'll be joined by Joy-Tendai Kangere of the organisation rooted in Africa and Ireland, and by Dr. Loveth Owhor of the African Scholars Association in Ireland. But before we meet them, don't forget to follow us on social media at MME Council and visit our website mmecouncil.org, where you can find out more about the organisation and where you can subscribe to our news bulletin. And now let's go straight over to meet our guests. Thank you for joining me for this Black History Month podcast. And maybe we'll just start, if you could just maybe tell me who you are and a little bit about yourselves. Joy-Tendai, maybe we'll start with you.
Thank you, Maurice, for having me, and it's a pleasure to be in the company of both yourself and Loveth. My name is Joy-Tendai Kangere, Zimbabwean born, but rooted in Ireland now. I'm a co-founder of Rooted in African Ireland, which is an organization that instills pride in being African and also in culture. I also sit on the board of AINTIS, which is the adult learning charity in Ireland, and I'm involved within intercultural and integration programs within the South Dublin County Council, so working with ethnic minorities and women.
Very good. Loveth?
Thanks a lot, Maurice, for having me here, and it's actually a pleasure to be on this podcast. My name is Loveth Owhor, and I am a bioresource technologist and a medical researcher. I have a PhD in reproductive medicine, and my area of expertise is in the female reproductive system, where I investigate the effects of inflammation in gametomaternal interaction. I'm also the secretary of African Scholars Association Ireland, and I lecture part-time in Institute of Anti-Racism and Black Studies. I'm also the school manager of the Institute of Anti-Racism and Black Studies. Thank you.
Thank you. And the association for the researchers, the African researchers in Ireland, tell us a little bit more about that. When did that get started?
Okay, the Association of African Scholars Ireland actually started in 2018. It's an association to bring all scholars of African descent into that in Ireland into a body. It's a place that we have a voice. We want to collectively collect all those that have a PhD, like scholars or even students. So what we do, we mentor students, PhD students of African descent, and we also have a body to not only mentor them, to assist them with in regards to writing their thesis, also to put them in the right way. And then as a body, we are trying to have a voice in Ireland to showcase that African body or Africans or African descent in Ireland has a voice or have a place for intellectuals where we can be fixed into the places of higher education, because we don't have a lot of Africans in academia, especially in our universities. So that's the struggle that we're having now, and that's the fight, or will I say, what we are grooming ourselves for to go into the academia.
Very good. And it sounds as though, Joy-Tendai, that complements your organisation quite well. That's another, with its emphasis on Africans in Ireland.
Absolutely. So the advocacy that I do is to start at, as people, migrants that come in, especially ethnic minorities that have moved to Ireland and want to reestablish themselves in education. So adult learning, which is very important because some people would have not accessed that in their countries of origin, or some people would have to because of the different barriers that are put within the employment market. People have to go back and re-educate themselves, and that's where we find that the advocacy is needed within AINTIS and within the structure of actually uplifting young people growing in Ireland, that it is okay to be Irish and to be Black, and to actually celebrate the duality of being that person.
That sounds great. I guess that sort of leads us neatly to the issue of Black History Month, because obviously it's a celebration of, well, Black history, obviously, as the title suggests. What do you think is the significance, or why do we need a Black History Month? Do we still need a Black History Month? Maybe Loveth, you could start with that.
Oh, of course, we definitely need a Black History Month, Maurice, because it's a time to reflect and look ahead. To me, the Black History Month is a time to reflect on all the beautiful things we have done over the years, to understand the foundation that people before us laid. So, looking at their struggles, their challenges, and where we are at today, to acknowledge our contributions to Africa and to development, especially in arts, science, and technology. Also, it's a constant reminder to be proud of our continent, a continent that we were taught to be ashamed of, and to celebrate what makes us unique. So when I look at Africa, the Black History Month, I see our history, I see our honor, I see our culture, opportunities, achievements, progress, strength, love, respect, and possibilities. So indeed, the Black History Month is a month that we need to celebrate, because we need to celebrate the rich and positive history of Africa and African descent. So how has Black history helped to shape the world today? What is the significance of this Black History Month? In my view, I was looking at the significance and what Black History Month has done. It has created a lot of awareness. The very first thing that came into my mind is it has provided nations with opportunities to hear the voices and experiences of people who have been historically oppressed, overlooked, ignored, and marginalized. It is gradually creating a platform for reflection into biases. We know, we talk about the bias, the bias that's everywhere. So this Black History Month has given us an avenue to showcase, to say this is what is going on with the Blacks. This is what we want to point out. It has given us an avenue to talk about the stereotypes we face as Blacks. It has given us the opportunity to talk about the gaps in knowledge when it comes to the Blacks. There are a lot of gaps in knowledge, and then the relationships across racial differences. The Black History Month, again, has also, one of the significance I saw too is that it's gradually giving room to system that consists of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we gradually, it's not in the pace that we want to see, but slowly and surely we are getting there. And the one that gladdens my heart the most is that the Black History Month has given Black children a sense of identity. It has given them, a lot of them are facing identity crisis, but when they're being taught about the Black History Month, they're being taught about inventors who are Blacks. They're being taught about achievements that the Blacks have gone through all the years. I was looking at it dating back to the 18th century, the 15th century, even the 13th BC. All that the Black has been able to accomplish. It gives me joy that the children coming now can relate. They have, will I call it, role models. They don't just see role models as the teachers in the class. They see role models in the same color as them. I know in one of the Black study class I was teaching, I was looking at inventors all the way back to the 1892. I was able to teach that the things as common as the pressing board, the ironing board that we use today, was actually invented by an African American woman in 1892. There's so many inventions that we have so many Black inventors. I look at the home security, where the alarm is big now in homes. It was actually invented by an African lady called Mary Van Brenten in as way back as 1966. The 3 traffic lights that we see today is actually invented by an African, and that was way back 1923. So there are a lot of inventors that are Black, and it gives me joy when I teach in the Black studies that we've gone past slavery. We've gone beyond slavery. There's so much good, there's so much contribution that we have, as Africans, have done or have given into the development of the world. So Black History Month to me has huge significance, and I see it as a platform to showcase the not just African descent or the achievement of Africa of the individuals, but the achievement of Africa as a continent.
Mm-hmm. And Joy-Tendai, I'm sure you. I must say, I was interested to find out that there was the ironing board and the traffic light. That those are interesting.
There are a lot of them. So much.
There must be a lot
but
to
time won't permit me to go into all of them. Yeah.
And but it's also great you're talking about children having role models. But Joy-Tendai, you're involved in adult education, so I assume that it's a similar sort of thing for adults as well.
I think it's so Loveth has really nicely put out and laid out the thing what Black History Month is about, but it's the same thing as people that celebrate let's say Valentine's Day. We know that there is love in the world, and Black History Month is every day, in the things that we do, in the culture that we live, in the way that we speak our languages, in the way that normally in the interaction that we partake in community. It is for me important that those people or society, even ourselves as Black people, sometimes we get engrossed and forget about our culture. It is important to put a step and say, look, this is our culture. As a mother and as a parent, I'm always intrigued when my children come up. When Hidden Figures came up, that was something that was so hidden in history that if the story hadn't been told, we would have not known that it was Black women behind, the space shuttle. That was something that would have just gone down and been buried, like a lot of history that coming back even from the continent, things that the wealth of knowledge that was taken from Africa onto the slave ships onto the American continent. That is so important, and I think some of these things we need a daily reminder. We need to remind ourselves, and it's not to show the world, but it is to remind us, so that whatever we put in our own, in ourselves, we can give back to our children and to community. Because when we see ourselves celebrating our achievements, people will celebrate with us. So it's all what Loveth has said. It's the language. It's teaching the next generation not to be afraid or to be shy, to wear a gele or to wear whatever you want to wear, to be seen eating with your hands, because that is how our ancestors did it. To speak a language, to be able to greet people in your language, which is, that is done on the continent. Language is the root of a nation. So I think we just have to really show where the track is. And I think when people really see the whole extent and the wealth of knowledge within the Black community, the world does respect people, and ourselves as Black people respect each other.
Very good. And I think also, I suppose, obviously Black History Month will have an impact on the African community themselves, but also on the wider society. I was thinking about, I saw a book recently called No Problem Here, which is about racism in Scotland, and it was as though everybody just thought, oh no, there's no problem. And I think people in Ireland and Northern Ireland sometimes think that as well. It isn't true, of course, and so perhaps Black History Month is a chance to address some of those issues and celebrate some of the positive achievements, but perhaps also educate some people who maybe have, let's kindly say, old-fashioned attitudes, perhaps. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but
no, it's true. I think with the island of Ireland, there's always been the thought. I always recall the teachers that taught me in my native Zimbabwe. I had a lot of Irish teachers, and they told me, and that is one of the reasons that I decided to migrate to Ireland. I could, the world is big, but they told me about the struggle, about the 1916 rising. And from that, I felt that they were a nation, or Ireland were a nation of people that understands the struggle of oppression. So you wouldn't expect that there is racism, because it's a process that, they've suffered. So it is important that sometimes we forget history needs to be retold and actually people be brought back to remember how life was before. And I think with that we create understanding. But because sometimes life takes over and we forget what our history is, we don't see our similarities. So that is my hope, that through history, through education, through even understanding the different, whether it's the Caribbean culture, the African cultures on the continent, you find that if you go back to the Brehon laws, they're so similar to some of the African laws that are there, customary laws that are there. But we oversee that and just see the differences. So that's where we need to go back history or become historians.
Indeed. I think that, Loveth, the phrase you used was equity, diversity and inclusion.
Yes,
I suppose for me,
Yeah.
that you've touched on that, Joy-Tendai, the idea of diversity, the fact that we're all different, and that doesn't mean that we all have to oppose each other. It just, there's a richness in diversity.
I totally agree with Joy. We need to go back to history. We need to rewrite the narrative. When I teach in the Institute of Black Studies, and whenever I go into the class, the first thing I ask the participants, it's for them to list all the positive things they've been taught about Africa. And every time I get the same response. And what's that response? Slavery. Slavery is not something, it's not a positive thing in my own understanding, but that's what has been taught about Africa.
Yes.
Africa has been painted this image of being backward. It's been painted this image of the poor cousin of the global communities, if you understand. And it's been painted this image of incapable of intellectual contribution. And that's what a lot of kids have been growing with. So we need to rewrite this narrative. And how better can we rewrite this narrative other than to educate people? We need to educate people. We need to let them know that, all that they've been taught about Africa, about slavery, Africa is more and beyond slavery. There's so much in Africa. And when you look at the Black studies, I'm talking about we introducing Black studies into the school's curriculum and into organizations. People need to learn. You can't really give what you don't have inside of you. Sometimes when I see people with being racist or with some of the racial behavior, I look at them and I say they don't know any better. They haven't been taught. They don't. We need to tell our story. We need to rewrite the narrative. And Black studies, it's one study that I think should come into schools, should come into organizations. It will give people the opportunity to see how successful and productive the Blacks are beyond slavery. And it will bring the positive vibes that we want to see. We want to be celebrated. We want this issue of being accepted, and how better for them to accept us other than to learn about us. We have accepted the white because even in schools, they are being taught about the white history. So we understand and we have accepted that. But it's kind of challenging for the white to accept the Black because they haven't learned the Black history. The only thing they know about the Black is being poor, slavery, and stuff like that, which we really don't want to showcase. Also, it will also help a lot of Black people, like I said, struggling with identity crisis, for them to know who they are, for them to become comfortable in who they are. Introduction of Black studies into the curriculum would create an inclusive education. Think about it, in a class where you have mixed children, and then you teach these mixed children about this Black studies. When they see the Black student next to them, they begin to appreciate and understand who that person is. It brings inclusive education. It brings diverse culture, for them to understand diverse culture and diverse value. When you understand someone's culture, you can appreciate the person's culture and you can appreciate the person's values. So I think introducing Black studies into our system, into education, it's very, very important. It's a hallmark of everything when we're talking about racism and discrimination. Introducing Black studies will go a long way to help. And when I look at, like Joy was talking about her children when talking about history, I was intrigued myself to learn that the first university in the world was actually found in Africa. It's called the Sankora University, found in Timbuktu in Mali. That's the western part of Africa. A lot of people don't know about this. They don't know that education actually started in Africa. The numerical numbers we use today, 1, 2, 3, is actually from Africa. So there are lots to be told. There are lots of stories about Africa that needs to be out there for people to really understand Africa and begin to appreciate Africa. And we are not doing so much. When I talk about it, I say we as Africans, we're not even doing so much about it. We, instead of fighting that someone is being racist, having the racial features, I think we should start educating them in acceptability, educating them of who we are. Like, I wouldn't want anyone to talk down on me. I want to tell you, this is who I am. I am comfortable in who I am. I am comfortable in my achievements. Let them understand the achievements. Let them understand that there is so much in Africa and there's so much in you being Black. I tell people that my unique quality is my color. So it sounds funny whenever I say that and they laugh. Yeah, but my unique quality is my color, and I'm very comfortable in it. So the issue of education cannot be overemphasized. We need to educate, and we need to do more education into Black studies.
So, yeah, Joy-Tendai, I don't know, what do you think are the prospects for making every month Black History Month in the, let's say, Irish education system? Do you think it's achievable?
I think the first thing we have to really realize is for policymakers to acknowledge that Ireland is no longer a monocultural society, and that we need to see people that are representative of everyone living in Ireland, whether it's in education, in health, in administrative work. We need to let our children, with what Loveth was saying, that it needs to be part, every education, whether it's African history, Caribbean history, Asian history. There is a lot of writers, there is a lot of customary laws that can be taught within the curriculum. And I think it's something that we're going to discuss, decolonizing the curriculum. It shouldn't be one voice. It shouldn't be the voice of the hunter that tells about the death of a lion. We should amplify. It shouldn't be given to other people or act as if within the Black community, the whole Black community. When I talk about the Black community, I'm talking about those in the African community and those our sisters and brothers that were whose ancestors were forcibly removed from the African continent and put in the Caribbean and put on the American continent and also in the South Americas, because they also need to hear their history. There's also a lack in not knowing, or the trauma of that has continued. If you look at in Canada, if you look in America, and any of the any of the indigenous people that have suffered still have that trauma. So I think it is possible if the policymakers do include it and say, let's learn about everyone. There's no harm in even asking. I know parents are very eager to come in, and some schools have introduced this. I'm not sure in Northern Ireland, but we have the Educate Together schools here in Ireland, in the Republic, where parents come in and they talk about the culture, whether it's a European culture, an African culture, and they're all learning there. And that is what should be the next step in just that acceptance that we can't just teach Irish history, and it takes it's from the policymakers and what they want to do about it.
That's a fascinating model. Actually, I wonder, I'll have to look into it and see whether there's anything like that in the Northern Irish system, but certainly a fascinating model. What I've heard from you both tonight is very much an emphasis on the positive, but then Joy-Tendai, as you were speaking there, it's also important to remember that darker side as well. I think obviously we can't gloss over that and just pretend, because I think one of the things for me anyway is that too many people in Northern Ireland, the UK, Ireland, don't really know the truth about that whole history of colonialism, the history of enslavement. And when they begin to learn it, it is quite an eye-opening thing, and it begins to make you think differently about the position of, say, the UK or Ireland in the world, or America, in relation to other countries. And so I think there's a job of education to be done there as well. I think that's our theme for tonight, education, isn't it? So, but so I don't know if you have any last final thoughts about where you want to go from here, or what projects you're looking forward to getting involved in now. Loveth, what about you?
Just to add to what Joy said, there's a statement I saw and I really love that statement. And it says, acknowledge the problem, but live in the solution. Acknowledge the problem, but live in the solution. And I think that's the biggest problem we have today, not acknowledging what the problem is. When we look at ourselves, when we look at the society, all the problems that are going on in the society, we have failed to acknowledge the problems. And when a problem is not acknowledged, like I said, acknowledging a problem is the first step to solving it. When a problem is not acknowledged, then solving the problem is going to be a big issue. And I think that's the problem we're having today in the island of Ireland and in Northern Ireland. In fact, if I look at the world in general, that's the problem we're having, not acknowledging the problem. Some people, especially when you put up the problem in front of people, some of them will just ignore the problem, or some would feel that they are so pressured into doing the right thing. But it shouldn't be that way. We should look at the problem collectively and then collectively think of how we can render solutions to these problems. So going forward, I think like we've been saying tonight, education cannot be overemphasized. And that's one way that we can begin to acknowledge the problem and coming into the solution. Once we are being educated, like I said, what you don't have inside of you, you can't give. When you have the knowledge inside of you, then you can begin to live the knowledge. You can begin to live in the solution.
Very good. Joy-Tendai, have you any final thoughts then for us?
So I echo what Loveth has said, and I think the work that needs to be done is policy. You educate, that's the knowledge, you empower, and then with that empowerment you have representation of the people that, Black excellence. I think people think that when we say let's celebrate Black History Month, or let's put the fore about Black people, it's you are now putting white people aside. Why are we not celebrating white people? Which is not it. We just say it is a time that the voices are never heard. The things that have been hidden in history come to the light, and in that short period, in this month that we speak and we walk with our chests out and our heads held up high, we are Black, we are proud. For the rest of the month, we know we can always go back and put our heads down, but this month, just let us, hold our heads up high. Policymakers need to come in and really, I think, advocating for, especially, I'm not sure about the laws in Northern Ireland, but in Ireland, that racism, bullying in schools, acknowledge, bullying, racism should be on a separate footing, besides bullying, because there is more harm. They're both hit at the integrity of a person, but with racism, we've seen that it actually destroys, it's like a virus, it destroys lives. So we need stronger legislation, especially for children that are growing up in education. And really, we say you're educating people, but if the hiring practices of institutions do not hire Black professors, don't hire Asian professors or anything that looks, they're not going to be that diversity of thought. If there is no, it's very difficult for someone that is coming from a different cultural background to, even if they have a problem. I went back as an adult learner. If you have a problem that is directly linked to your culture. It's very difficult to talk to someone that you think won't understand what you're going through. So it's all across the hiring practices of institutions that there are competent scholars, like with the FSI, that there are people, PhD holders living within the Republic of Ireland. Give them a chance to teach. Let them represent. And if that is not enough, it's something that is not here in Ireland, but social inclusion, cultural competency should be made mandatory for teachers in schools. That it is an option. Teachers opt out. They don't want to learn. So how are you going to teach children from different cultures if you don't have the understanding or about social inclusion? So my thing is just the framing of policy and the knowledge that we need cultural competent teachers, whether you are hiring people from ethnic minorities or people are being trained to understand other cultures. So that's my hope for the future.
Very good. Thank you very much.
And in adding to what Joy just stated, looking at employing people of diverse, especially the minority ethnic group, it's very, very important. And with our Institute of Anti-Racism and Black Studies, we are going into schools to teach, to get, especially bodies that are in the diversity and inclusion team. We have a lot of them coming in. And then in higher institution, we have some universities sending in their staff into the institute to teach them about Black studies, to teach them about diversity and inclusion. So it's very important. We want to teach them about these things, but we also want to be in the places of learning as well. We want to be in the higher institution. We want to teach in there, want to lecture in there, but we're not given the rooms. So like what Joy said, it would be nice for students, especially. I know I've done a survey, and when you ask students, who would you like to see teaching you? Someone of same color as you or someone that has a different color? A lot of them tend to go towards someone that has same color as them because they think that the person can relate. They can relate easily with such a person. So it's very difficult for the Black kid in the class. Every time you come in, you see all white teachers and you don't have Black teachers. So it's very difficult. It's a challenge to the Black kid. So I think there is variety. They say spice up the life. So if we have Black teachers in our institution, then we can spice up our institution. So it's very important if we're talking about diversity and inclusion in one area, especially we're looking at the industrial sectors now. How about the institutions of higher learning, the institutions of education? We need to bring this into these institutions as well. We need to show, it should be the bedrock for diversity and inclusion, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. And on that spicy note, I think we're probably out of time here. So thank you very much, Joy-Tendai, Kangere, and Dr. Loveth.